Do you remember when an Apple product launch felt, well, like actual magic? I mean, picture it. January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs walks out on stage and he says, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone." And the crazy thing is, they actually did it. For more than a decade, that's who Apple was, right? They were the company that sold you a little piece of the future. Yeah, and that was pretty much everyone's reaction. It was this collective, holy crap, I didn't even know I needed this. They weren't just selling gadgets. Every single one of those launches made you feel like you were watching a real deal revolution happen right in front of your eyes. Because let's be honest, that feeling is completely gone today. The company that used to feel untouchable now kind of feels like it's fumbling, right? They're dropping thousands of dollars on headsets nobody really asked for, and their AI feels like it's from a different decade. So in this explainer, we're going to break down how Apple went from think different to, well, something else. Okay, let's get into it. All right, Section 1, Reinventing the Future. To really get what's going on now, we have to rewind the clock, back to a time when Apple was basically on life support. And it's really hard to wrap your head around this now, but it's true. They were less than 90 days from going completely broke. They were just making these boring beige boxes. Then Steve Jobs comes back and just flips the whole script. He basically said, hey, computers don't have to look like medical equipment. The goal was no longer about competing on specs. It was about creating technology that people would actually want, something you desire. And that one simple shift led to this, just an unbelievable string of hits. First, the iMac comes out, makes computers fun again, and boom, saves the company. Then, the iPod. It wasn't just another MP3 player, it was 1,000 songs in your pocket. Then, of course, the iPhone, which made every other phone on the planet look like a cheap calculator. And finally, the iPad, which just created an entire market out of nowhere. See the pattern? Each one of these things didn't just compete, it completely blew up the category and redefined it. And that's how, by 2012, they became the most valuable company in the world. But here's the really crucial point. Apple's power wasn't just built on making good stuff. It was built on creating desire. Their keynotes were these massive cultural events because they were selling you the future, and absolutely everyone wanted a piece of it. Okay, Section 2, From Visionary to Operator. Because right at the peak of all this came the turning point. In October 2011, Steve Jobs passed away, and Tim Cook stepped in. And this wasn't just a change in CEO, it was a fundamental shift in the entire company's DNA. And this slide really gets to the heart of the whole argument. You had Steve Jobs, the visionary, the guy who sold magic. And then you have Tim Cook, who, look, he's an undisputed genius at supply chains, an absolute wizard who turned Apple into a money-printing machine. But the argument goes, his creative vision is basically that of a spreadsheet. The focus went from these massive, revolutionary leaps to small, predictable, incremental updates. And you could totally see this change in the products themselves. The iPhone 5 was, well, it was thinner. The 5C was colorful. The 5S got a fingerprint scanner. I mean, look, they weren't bad products by any stretch, but they were improvements, not breakthroughs. The magic was gone, and in its place, you just got these predictable, yearly spec bumps. Okay, on to Section 3, a series of fumbles. Because this slow, play-it-safe approach eventually leads us to right now, where it's resulted in some pretty major and very public stumbles. Let's start with the Vision Pro. It's an absolutely incredible piece of tech, no doubt about it. But for $3,500, who is this actually for? Early reviews basically called it impressive technology looking for a purpose. Think about the iPhone. It had an immediate, obvious reason to exist. The Vision Pro? It feels more like a really, really expensive science fair project. And at the exact same time, the rest of the tech world is in the middle of this massive AI revolution. And Apple, they were just left in the dust. Their assistant, Siri, is over a decade old, and it still struggles with basic requests that other AIs handle without breaking a sweat. We're not talking about a small gap here. It was a chasm. It really showed that Apple had completely missed the boat on the next huge wave in tech. Which brings us to their chaotic attempt to play catch-up, Apple Intelligence. They get on stage, call it revolutionary, but the demo was pretty obviously faked. Then they admit key features won't be ready for years and ask people to join a waitlist. I mean, just think about that for a second. They are actively selling brand new iPhones based on the promise of features that don't exist yet and might not show up until 2026 or 2027. And you know what the worst part is? They knew it was a total mess. Leaked internal messages showed that one of their own executives called the whole Siri situation ugly and embarrassing. This is the company that built its entire reputation on products that just work. And now, they're knowingly selling people on promises they know they can't keep. So why? Why is all this happening? Well, that brings us to our final section, the prison of profit. This is where we look at how Apple's obsession with profit and control might have actually built a prison of its own making. Take the App Store. It used to be this shining example of quality control, right? But now, a lot of critics are calling it a corporate prison. Why? Because Apple takes a 30% cut of pretty much everything, and they enforce these really strict, often random-seeming rules on developers. That control, which used to be a selling point, now feels like it's just choking the life out of the creativity that made the whole thing great in the first place. And hey, it's not just developers who are fed up. Governments are finally stepping in. The European Union slammed Apple with a massive €1.8 billion fine for these abusive rules, basically forcing them to start tearing down the walls of their ecosystem. It's a huge, flashing sign that the rest of the world is getting pretty tired of Apple's walled garden. And here's the real-world consequence of all this. While Apple was busy polishing yesterday's technology, Microsoft, was going all in on AI and the cloud. And in 2024, they snatched the crown. The company that makes Windows is now officially worth more than the company that made the iPhone. Wild. This all boils down to one fundamental question about what Apple even is anymore. Are they a technology company that happens to be profitable? Or are they a profitable company that just happens to make technology? And lately, it really feels like the answer is the second one. It seems like they've gotten so focused on feeding the profit machine that they've lost sight of the actual innovation that built the whole thing. So to answer our original question, what the hell happened? Well, the conclusion is pretty blunt. Apple got comfortable. It got corporate. And worst of all, it got boring. And in the world of tech, let me tell you, boring is the kiss of death. The revolution isn't over. It just moved on without them. And that really leaves us with just one final question. The company whose whole mantra was to think different seems to have forgotten how to think at all. So can they find that magic again? Can they rediscover what made them so special in the first place? Or are we all just watching the slow, predictable decline of a titan that's more interested in counting its cash than in actually changing the world?